Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. As part of our how-to series, we're going to look at how to let go and separate from the internal entanglement of others when they make you angry. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below, and we will get back to you personally. And finally, you can reserve your place in one of my seminars or purchase any of my mind-body guides, also known as the PDFs, at www.crushingdoubt.org. There's few things that can infiltrate your mind and body as quickly as an encounter that gets you angry. In fact, one of the things I often talk about as mind-body evidence is the fact that you can remember an anger-inducing event, and your whole body gets right back into it. The entire physiology comes back. Our physiologies change on a moment-to-moment basis, and the second we activate that anger experience again, the same physiology returns. You can see it in people's faces when they're angry. We know right away. Their eyes are dilated differently, their mouths convey it, their skin tone changes, everything changes. This is also one of the reasons we find it hard to feel at peace and safe in the world, because one little interaction can change everything in our day, and it can feel like the whole world has changed along with it. Now, some less sensitive people will claim that this does not happen, but I would argue that they are just less attuned to what is happening in their bodies and minds, and many things can flow from these little moments of anger, even with them, if we aren't aware of them. But here's the kicker. Until I really understood the mind-body process, which is increasingly more and more fully true, I did not believe there was much I could do after getting activated by such events. I just thought I had to wait it out. I knew I would calm down eventually, but this was little comfort to me because it felt so bad. One thing that would have helped me so much in managing these experiences would have been to have some real confidence in some set process within myself for getting past them. And that takes, as a first step, the belief that they can be gotten past at all. So today is a chance for us to think once again about moment-to-moment experience and how this understanding affords us a chance to get control of some things we thought we could not get control of at all. Similar to dealing with chronic pain, what I needed was an understanding of what was happening in me and why it was happening, and a system I could use again and again to disarm these experiences. One of the first steps in building this system for yourself is to recognize the role of trauma. Trauma is a word that can be overused, such as if someone talks about the trauma of their food order coming back wrong. We are prone to exaggeration at times, but this does not mean we aren't also prone to dismissal of our own deep pain, loss, fear, shock, and lack of safety. As such, it is also an underused word, because we all dismiss what was traumatic in our lives all the time. The way I think about it is this. About small things, we should not invoke the word trauma because it cheapens the word and lessens the power when it is used correctly. But we also should be ready to use that word about anything that really did make us feel profoundly unsafe, even small things. For me, and I would guess for the vast majority of people, angry encounters actually qualify in that kind of lowercase t sort of way. It isn't major, it isn't life-altering, it isn't even lasting. But in that moment, it feels so bad that you're knocked back into trauma, as I put in quotes. What I mean by this is that we have a state of being that we can call trauma. We go in and out of it. Trauma as such isn't something to be judged as valid or not, but more so to be thought of as active or not. Trauma is a state, not a trait. Once we accept this, we have built the first part of our system to deal with people when they make us angry. When we're able to recognize trauma, we have a chance then to let it calm down. We also have a chance to not trust what we are saying to ourselves about ourselves or the experience and make it a less dire or high-stakes situation. You need to measure when you have the bandwidth, as they say, to deal with a problem. And when you're in trauma, you do not have that. But once you're out, you can. Or even once you're observing it, you have more of a chance. At that point, the system you've developed for this can focus on making a decision about what to do about the person making you angry. In most cases, the answer is going to be nothing, at least externally, but a lot internally. Externally, there's usually little to be done. The other person, they are who they are, and if they thought it was wrong to do what they did, they probably wouldn't have done it. But this does not mean they're excused, but more so puts you on the path of reorganizing how you're going to think about what happened, and most importantly, what it means. The first action step after sorting out the state of trauma is to tell yourself that you are going to take some action to make you feel powerful again. You may not know what that is right away, but that's what you're going to look for. Because that is the crux of the matter. When someone is angry with us or makes us angry with them, we feel reduced in power because there usually is so little we think we can do. You need to be able to search for something to do to get your power back. The good news is there are tons of things we can do. And there's always an answer with respect to resolving things in our relationship with ourselves so that we can feel powerful again. When people make us angry, we feel entangled with them. We are partially dependent on them, or at least that's how it feels, to help us feel better because we feel entangled. The way to get disentangled is to not need anything from them at all. It's to recognize that you can resolve the whole thing all by yourself. Now, to handle it all by yourself, a new understanding of the situation is required. So what needs to be understood in a new way? The first thing is the question of whether or not you are at fault. The answer is basically never that it is your fault. Most interpersonal problems come from misunderstandings, unfair judgments, projection of problems, or incompetencies, or lack of development in emotional maturity and functioning, usually on the side of the person who's always making the other people angry. The only exception being when the people you are making angry all the time are toxic. Then you're free of this paradigm altogether. You don't need to assess, is it your emotional maturity or theirs? If they're toxic, it's theirs. In the other situations, it's usually not you. Put the question to rest of whether you are at fault. If you have made a concerted effort to make gains in emotional functioning in general, and you've tried to communicate well with this person, and you meant well, you're done. Nothing else is needed on your end. Here's another thing that needs to be changed to get disentangled from people in these situations. You want to leave certain beliefs behind. The belief that the person treats you the way they do because they think the same way as you needs to be thrown out. They don't. If they treat you in a way you never would treat anyone, it's because they don't think the same way about things at all. Here's an example. I have often found when someone won't talk to me when they're angry, I assume it comes from their feeling dismissive or rageful or wanting to escalate the tension, because that's what it would mean for me if I were to do that, which is why I never do it. But as an example, for my wife, she doesn't talk sometimes because she's afraid of talking, because in her world, talking has only messed things up more. So not talking, in her mind, is being protective of me. You can hear how I changed the meaning of it by understanding the person involved. Now, you may not understand the person involved. That may take some time. But if you can understand that person, so much the better. That brings me to the next thing that needs to shift. Whether you know the person well or not, your understanding of who that other person is can be shifted to a less pejorative stance on both them and you. Reinterpreting the other person not as a powerful adversary, but a scared one. Usually people are scared. Here's a good example. I had gotten into a conflict with somebody I had been close with, and there was a level of communication that was so far below what I would have expected from our past, from what I would hope for, and I was taking it as a condemnation of me, that, wow, this person must be so angry at me, or I must have done something so wrong. First, I had to get myself out of the trauma of it. And then I started thinking about the fact that this person doesn't operate the way I do, because I would never do that. And then I realized it. They were avoiding the situation. They were afraid. I was viewing it as they weren't afraid. They were clear on the situation, and I had done something wrong. So I was misinterpreting what was really going on. And when I got to the right idea that they were afraid and avoiding, boom. I understood exactly what was going on, and I felt at peace. Another great example of this is in film. In one of my favorite movies, Good Will Hunting, which has my favorite therapist, possibly of all time, other than a few real therapists. He gets into a real conflict with Will because Will tries to make him feel really uncomfortable and unhappy and provoked about the painting that his wife did. And he sees him the next day, and he says, I couldn't sleep all night until I remembered, you're just a scared kid. and then I slept like a baby. That's not the exact phraseology he had, but that tells you the kind of shift that can happen here. One thing to keep in mind that is there, though, which can also give you a sense of safety in less important relationships, is looking out for the aggression others can bring and learning to not take it personally. There is essentially an ongoing war on your own power from the aggression of the outside. People in general, especially with people they don't know, and especially when they're not so emotionally mature, they're trying to bring people down. If you just note it as a general thing, it's not as big of a deal. So try to think of this as a general problem of humanity and not one that is about you or relating to your deficits or things you should be doing differently. It had nothing to do with you. It was always going to be that way. Personally, my closest people don't do this at all, as I find that it comes from a place of emotional immaturity and I don't want to deal with that. When I am in my power column, which is as often as possible, I realize that I don't need to engage with this in any way. I can spend the time on the people who are good to me or even those that are just currently being good to me. We can disentangle from the anger others cause in us by recognizing they aren't actually the ones with the power here. They have power over their lives, but we have power over our lives. This is the way out. We get angry with them or hung up on their being angry with us because we feel they have the power over us. They don't. It is an illusion, even if an unpleasant one. So people often ask me how to use the power column, and this is a good example of how. We're going to continue to assess if we are in or out of power at the present moment. It's always about the present. We do this with ourselves, others, and our symptoms. Just get a sense of whether you're in power or not. Then you recognize the general broad framework in which you aren't feeling powerful if you find that you're not. What's the basic idea? Then you pinpoint the specific way you've come to feel not powerful. And all of that information can allow you to sift through the few action steps you might take and choose the one that best allows you to feel more powerful again after you've weighed all the variables. This is why an internal action step is usually the way to go. You don't need them to allow you to disentangle. You get to walk away without them even knowing you left sometimes. And it all comes from finding your peace in the situation. If you haven't already, click subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, hit like if you like what you're hearing, and put your comments below and we'll get back to you personally.